Welcome to today's episode of the podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I am thrilled today to have the esteemed Dr. Michael, and I'm going to say his name right this time, Saini, correct?
Perfect.
Okay,
Yes.
I said it wrong last time. I'm going to keep practicing this until I get it right every time. With us for my very first second time guest. So thank you for doing this and welcome back.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here. It's wonderful. Thank you for inviting me back.
For those of you who didn't listen to the previous episode with Dr. Saini, I first talked with him generally about alienation and Caden's law and a whole bunch of different research that he is working on. He is out of Toronto and has a lot of worldwide influence, and I think is doing research in virtually every area that we discussed. So very fortunate to have you here back on the show. Last time we talked about how Dr. Saini had done some work on incremental trust building. And I have seen through so much of my work that that is such a core problem for co-parents because the trust, one of your most intimate relationships has eroded. And so the trust has understandably completely been broken down usually. And so I thought it was very interesting to hear that Dr. Saini had done this work. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So give us a little intro. Tell us why you maybe did this research and some initial thoughts on what people need to think about in terms of introduction to this.
For sure. So, when you think about what we've been trying to accomplish in terms of high conflict and putting boundaries around the conflict when parents separate, we haven't really been able to move that far in the last 40 years. We can put boundaries around the conflict, but we don't actually do a lot to change the dynamics. We can try and put structure. We use the courts. We use clinical professionals. We use forensics. We try everything we can to put a boundary around the conflict so it doesn't spill over to the kids. And we tell parents, don't involve your children in the conflict, but then they do. And so we haven't really moved that far in the last, 40, 50 years since we've been really studying separation and divorce. And so on the other side of conflict is really the lack of trust. And so what if we were going about this the wrong way? What if instead of focusing on putting boundaries around the conflict, what if we were instead trying to address trust violations and try and repair those in some sort of incremental way so that they can hopefully, with some assistance, create some more foundational trust, or at least have some foundational trust if there's no trust left in that relationship. Then when we do ask them to take on a parenting plan, or we give them parent education that we hope that they're going to apply to their family and to their children, that they're more likely then to integrate it because now we have a foundation of trust.
So is it fair to say that you make the assumption, that we can make the assumption that there's some level of trust before the divorce or breakup? Maybe at some time during the relationship, trust was probably violated because we see this family unit breaking up. But is the idea that you may, and maybe you can define trust for us, but that you had it at one point, and maybe that's even more injurious, right? If you had it at one point and then you lost it versus never having it and still not having it.
Yeah, you look at a relationship where they've had conflicts, and if they started off if you think of a bank account, you open up a bank account and you start putting money into the bank, and you start saving and saving, and that's what you do with trust in a relationship. You keep on saving trust into your relationship because one day you're going to have to withdraw from trust. You're going to have to withdraw from that bank account. And you want to make sure that there's some money in the bank that you're withdrawing from. What happens is that sometimes you withdraw so much, like an affair, for example, or you withdraw over time, a little bit at a time. Every single time you criticize, every single time you have those small micro trust violations. They start depleting the account. And so by time they separate, there's nothing left in the account. So we ask them to trust that, the child is going to be fine at the other parent's home, but there's nothing left in the bank for them to withdraw from. So they're in overdraft by time they separate and they're involved with us. And yet we're asking them to trust each other. Since I've been doing all of this research on trust, I have changed the way I do parenting plan evaluations, because now I'm asking parents, I'm asking about their propensity to trust. So, how trusting are they as individuals, generally speaking? And then, how much do they trust the person in which they're in conflict with? And then I want to know, from a calculus-based trust, what will it take specifically for you to start trusting the other person? And it may mean that they need to see, before anything else happens, they need to see the other parent show up on time at least 3 times. Well, now we can measure trust building. Now we're making progress. Now we're looking for solutions, and we're not stuck in the problems of the past. Like, a problem is only a problem until you find the solution. And so in that case, I would want to know, how would they want to get past that barrier? Because parents don't want to be stuck in conflict if they had a choice. I always like to ask parents, what will you do when you no longer have to deal with conflict? What will you do with your time? What hobbies will you take to replace the amount of time that you're spending on the conflict? Knowing that they would rather not be in this situation if they could. And the opposite of love is not hate, but it's a place of acceptance. And so if they're still hating each other, then there's this emotional connection that's keeping them engaged in court. And so how to start thinking about beyond that dispute, beyond that conflict, what do you need to see happen, first and then second and then third, to really have you start thinking about trusting this person, at least in a way that you're okay with the child spending that time with them. It's not going to be perfect, and Winnicott's good enough parenting concept is a really nice model to use, because we typically assess parents as being experts, and, well, no one's an expert. I'm not an expert parent. And but I'm good enough in terms of Winnicott's good enough parenting. As long as I'm not harmful, I'm not abusive, then good enough is just okay. And so how do you get parents to trust that the other parent is good enough to take care of the child when they're not around? That's the real key of what's often missing in what we're doing.
You mentioned there's a few areas where the trust building model is not appropriate, right? What tell us
Yes.
about those a little bit? Like, there are some situations where we shouldn't be trying to do this. What
For
are they?
sure. So I think, one of the concerns around trust building is that we're going to put people in unsafe situations where we're going to demand that they need to, trust somebody who has been abusive to them. And safety needs to be paramount. And if trust has been violated because of violence, it's not for the person who has been harmed by that violence to be responsible for trusting the person who's been activating in that violence. It would be instead an invitation to take responsibility, work with that person to help them understand why the other person doesn't trust you. Yeah, but still, I've done anger management, and I've done this and I've done that. Yeah, but that's not enough. You have to understand that we need to do baby steps. We're not going to get to where you want to get to right away. You're asking for 50-50. That's not going to happen. In fact, the more you push it, the more they're going to be resisting, because with power comes resistance. And you need to understand that that resistance is because you're taking too many steps forward. You're feeling that you should be forgiven and everything should be forgotten. And that's not going to happen. We need to make sure that things are safe, and we need to make sure that that whatever we do, we acknowledge the harm that the violence has created. That it doesn't just happen once; it has that ripple effect, and we need to be thinking about trust along that ripple effect.